Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Welcome back everyone to another discussion in our class of modern transactions. Today's class probably will be the most controversial subject that we discuss, which is the nature of money, modern money that is. Of course, the money and the currency of the Sharia is the dinar and the dirham, the gold coin and the silver coin, which comes from the ancient world, from antiquity. The money that was circulating at the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the Salaf were Roman. The dinari and the drachman, which are come from Europe. And then I think it was in the Umayyad period that the Umayyad dynasty in which Islamic currency was first minted, which is like in the first century of Islam. Anyway, the point is that we definitely don't have that today, right? We used to have paper money, but now most people don't even use paper money; they use digital money. So this presents a whole host of problems because there are many things that are obligatory when it comes to money, such as zakah, and there are many things that are prohibited, such as riba and ribawi transactions. There's also riba in foodstuffs and things like that. But today's class we're going to talk about money. So we want to understand a little bit about the classical understanding of money. What do the fuqaha understand from gold and silver being the main currency? And then we're going to look a little bit through the transition of time of how we got to the current situation of money, in which there used to be promissory notes, bank notes that promised an exact amount of gold or silver, and then there used to be currency that's simply backed by gold and silver or partially backed by gold and silver, until the mid 1970s, when we have a complete severing of an entire world order has severed the gold standard or silver standard from the currency. So now what we have, or when I was growing up, we had fiat currency, which is paper money, and now we are moving away from paper money. It still exists, but to digital currency. So what are the implications vis-a-vis zakah and riba in that? Of course, there's differences of opinion. We'll kind of have to go through that, and you'll have to be comfortable understanding that there are differences of opinion. So these are some of the main topics I want to talk to you about, and we'll begin the discussion as usual in the next clip, inshallah. I think it helps to make sense of not just today's topic, but topics in general in this course, is that you have to understand and be comfortable with this following sentiment, that the classical fiqh, what we refer to in Arabic as al-fiqh al-mawruth, the inherited fiqh, the fiqh that we transmit through our direct chains of transmission, the fiqh that I've been teaching you all, and the usul that goes behind the fiqh, is limited in the issues that it discusses, as I mentioned before, because those are the issues that are directly taken from the primary text. And also it's limited because it is a discussion that's a snapshot in time. If you think about it, any fiqh book is essentially an usuli snapshot in time, a result of an ijtihad, a snapshot of ijtihad in time. That doesn't mean that it's not of any worth. It's the exact opposite, of tremendous worth, because when you study that, you see how, especially when you study books in different periods of time, like the Matn of Abi Shuja is very old. Imam Abu Shuja, radiallahu anhu, his name appears in one of the chains of transmission of hadith, and we talked about that. So I mean, that's very Salaf period. And then the commentaries that Ibn Qasim, is medieval, and then Ibayjuri is quote unquote modern. I mean, so if you think about it, we're kind of all three major time periods, old, middle, and new, are discussed in addition to oftentimes when we come to appropriate issues in the fiqh. I kind of mentioned to you, like, well, in the modern world, this is the way the modern Shafi'is deal with this or deal with that. So there's tremendous benefit because the fiqh is the result of ijtihad. So you see the result of the thinking at the given time. And we're basically doing the same thing. This is the manhaj of Islam. This is the manhaj of the Salaf. But specifically when it comes to issues of gold and silver, currency, money, etc., the world has changed drastically in the last 70 years. So, even beyond that, I mean, in the last 200 years, these type of changes started to begin. And then in the last 50 years especially, there's a lot of changes. So that's why a lot of these issues are still being hashed out by the different fiqh bodies and the ulama. So basically, as I said, up until, let's say, 250 years ago, Islamic currency was gold and silver. Maybe they were called different things, but they were basically the dinar and the dirham. And we have very strict texts about how we barter and how we trade with the dinar and the dirham. I can't give you 2 gold coins and I can take back 3 gold coins. That's textbook riba. Or I can't give you 5 silver coins and take back 7 silver coins. That's textbook riba. So that's one learning that you need to know. There used to be bartering. In the ancient world, there was just people would barter. I'll give you some of this and you give me some of that, and that was fine. But as population increased, as cities began to be formed, here I'm talking about way before Islam, thousands of years before Islam, and people were moving, movement became more doable. Bartering is not necessarily, it's not a sustainable model of economy. You can't build a whole economy just based on bartering, because what if I want you to help me build my house, something massive, or if I need a car? How do you barter of something at that level? I might not be able to provide you the equivalent of that because of the amount of like livestock I would need, or fruits, and they could go bad. So obviously it's not a tenable thing. So that's when gold and silver became a common way of trading. And the reason is that gold and silver are just limited. There's only so much gold that you can't just make gold in a lab. Maybe people can or try with alchemy and those type of sciences and disciplines to try to turn anything to gold. But at the end of the day, gold is limited. And one of the things that the fuqaha understood, the mujtahids of the ummah understood, is one of the reasons Allah Ta'ala made the gold and silver the standard of currencies, because gold and silver have intrinsic value. They retain value and they're limited. So there's a kind of a balance in the economic system. So gold and silver became, the way that people trade, and gold doubloons and things like that. Not just in the Muslim, we inherited this from the ancient world. The gold and even the word dinar and dirham are not originally Arabic words. And the coins that the Prophet ﷺ would have touched and used, and the Sahaba, were not minted by the government or the mint in Medina, because we didn't have that yet, as I said in the introductory clip. So when we deal with gold and silver, it's kind of easy, because there's zakah on gold and silver, because there are texts about that, and there is riba in gold and silver, because it can be weighed, and because there are texts about that. And therefore, understanding those type of transactions are very, very simple and straightforward. However, maybe in the 1600s, in Europe, again, this is another kind of like European thing, gold and silver are heavy. So in yesterday's class, I talked about a boat and cargo and transatlantic travel, or traveling across a sea or a body of water or something like that. Well, weight is going to be a concern. I might not be able to carry all the gold and silver that I need, because it's just simply too heavy, because I have the men, the rations and the food for the men, the supplies, plus the cargo that I'm carrying, or that I'm trying to barter or sell or whatever. How can I also carry the gold and silver, which are quite heavy? They really add up. So therefore, this idea, I think it was the Dutch that came, that were the first. There are these like promissory notes. It's sort of like an IOU, that instead of carrying several hundred kilograms of gold and silver, I can put in my pocket or in my purse or in my bag or my briefcase a few slips of paper that are promissory notes. Now, for the promissory note to work, there has to be a financial institution. So kind of both of these things kind of are parallel, in the history of money and the history of the development of what we know today as the international financial system, is there has to be some kind of financial house that will guarantee and back that promissory note, so you can call in. But the promissory note is a promissory note for gold and silver. So it's just a representative of the gold and silver. So that's kind of the first difference that emerges in the history of the financial transactions, is that we're going to have some kind of paper document that will guarantee the value in gold and silver. So for the traditional fiqh, okay, we're still in the same discussion. We're still talking about gold and silver. Whether I promise you that I'm going to give you gold and silver, or whether I actually put on the table gold and silver, it has to be mithl bil mithl. It has to be the same amount. There's riba, and once I get that money, if it's in my complete ownership, if it's past the nisab, if a year passes, a lunar year, I'm going to have to pay the zakah on it. And then that kind of came, then paper money, the banknote increased. So rather than sort of like a promissory note, why don't we have currency itself to make the switch faster, rather than me having to carry the promissory note and wait months for you to get the money, or vice versa. We'll just have paper bank note, which is also a promissory note, but the bank note can be redeemed at the financial institute for the amount of gold and silver that it represents. So if I have £1 banknote, maybe I can get a pound of silver or a pound of gold, and now these financial institutions are operating internationally, transatlantically throughout Europe, parts of Asia, Russia, etc. So I can take this banknote if I was in Paris, and I could probably travel across Europe and go to another country in Eastern Europe, and I can give it to the bank institution and take my money. So that's another advancement, right? But it's still, the banknote is gold and silver, right? It's just a lighter way of traveling. I don't have to burden myself and my animal and my traveling situation with the weight of the gold and silver, and it could be stolen, and it's difficult to carry. Maybe I can't carry it. I'm by myself. I have too much, so on and so forth. So this just becomes a way to redeem it. So it's a little bit more than a promissory note. It's a bank note. It's paper currency. It's a banknote that you can then redeem for the gold and silver. So we're still in the one-to-one thing where the banknote is the gold and silver. The banknote is talking about directly, it's translating into gold and silver. And then the further development of that is that each country will kind of develop its own currency, which confuses the situation even more. And I'm not an expert in currency policy or anything like that, but the further development of that and evolution of that is that the currency is backed by gold and silver. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one ratio, but X number of my country's currency would equal, let's say, 10 grams of gold. So it's not that each single note is a representative of the gold and silver, it's that a collective of notes, or the value of my currency, is backed by the reserves, the gold. Let's just stick with gold because that's usually what the case is, by the gold reserves that my country has. And that's why some currencies become stronger than other currencies. All of this, evolution that we've talked about, from bartering, well, bartering is kind of out of it because that's bartering, but buying right out with gold and silver, a promissory note for the gold and silver, a currency that is exchanged for gold and silver, and now a banknote rather that is exchanged for gold and silver, and now a currency that is backed by gold and silver. All of that is essentially, from the point of view of the Sharia, gold and silver, and the ahkam of gold and silver apply. Let me pick up the discussion in the next clip, inshallah. So we talked about this progression from, and I know this is like an oversimplification, but in this case I think it's warranted because you don't really need to know more than this. There's bartering, which is kind of the early way that humankind exchanged things. That became untenable, so then we need to have something of more value that retains value, that's limited in its supply, which is gold and silver. Different regions would call it different things, and there are different weights to it. By the way, the weights of the Islamic gold and silver, the dinar and the dirham, are taken from the Roman, what was the standard currency of that. So that's something where it's interesting, where we go back to the museums, for example, and see the most accurate minted gold dinar or silver drachma, what was its weight, and then that becomes the weight upon which we base the nisab in Islamic weights and measurements and means, which is an interesting sub-subject of Islamic law. And then carrying all of that, especially long distance, becomes difficult, as I said, so then we have a promissory note. The promissory note then necessitates some type of financial institution that will handle that promise and pay that promise. And then that's where the law, I didn't mention this in the previous clip, but that's sort of where the law comes in, because those financial institutions have to be protected by sovereignty. In other words, there has to be a sovereign guarantee. The state of a certain body politic has to authorize that and therefore protect that for me to trust that I can barter that way with institution. But if anybody can set up a shack of a financial institution and it's not regulated, therefore it's not protected, therefore there's a lot of gharar. And by the way, this is one of the issues with cryptocurrency that I'll try to talk to in the next and final clip, the lack of this type of regulation. And then the promissory note backed by the financial institution, one step further became the bank note. So therefore we kind of advanced the promissory note a little bit, but the bank note can be redeemed. And then that with the growth of other financial institutions and individual currencies, a lot of this was in Europe, so there are all these small little principalities and countries, what we call today countries, but body politics. There's a lot of different currencies, so therefore the currency then becomes eventually backed by a certain amount of gold reserve that each country has. All of that, as I said, as I ended the last clip, from the Sharia, the mind of the Sharia says that's gold and silver. There's riba in that. So you can't, I can't give you £5 of whatever currency and then take from you £6. Why? Because it's not really the paper money that we're concerned with, it's the gold and silver. And then likewise, we also have to pay zakah on it. The Sharia also acknowledges that gold and silver are not the only things that are used to purchase things. So throughout Islamic history, that's in the classical period, there are other types of monies, what we call fulus. So in the Sharia we say an-naqdain, the two mined things, an-naqd here, naqdain being gold and silver. But then there is other types of metals like bronze, copper that can be used as money, we call that fulus. So in the Sharia, so this is one of those things where we have a couple of tethers to the past. It's not like we're in a situation where we've never dealt with before. We have fulus. So then the question is there riba in fulus or is there not riba in fulus? Is there zakah in fulus or is there not zakah in fulus? Of course, we'll come to see shortly that there are differences of opinions. The key is that up until the 1970s, and that's where I think a lot of the modern fuqaha and muftis, especially the people that we refer to as modern muftis, but were like in the 40s and 50s, a lot of reasons why their takif, their understanding and conceptualization of the issue is different from the way we understand it today in the 2000s is because of this issue, is that now there are no currencies that are backed by gold and silver. But when you read about fulus in the books of fiqh, the fulus is assumed, whether it be paper, copper, bronze, whatever the case may be, it's always going to be linked in some shape, way, or form with the gold and silver. So there will be zakah in it, and then there will also be riba in it as well. So the Malikis, the Hanafis, in one of their narrations, and Imam Ahmad, they say that fulus, non-gold and silver money that is used as paper money, what we say rajat means it's being used as paper money. It is connected to, in the Sharia rulings, to gold and silver. However, the Shafi'is, our madhab, another opinion or narration in the Hanafi madhab, and another opinion, and another opinion, another narration in the Hanbali madhab, that fulus, non-gold and silver monies, cannot be considered money. They are considered a way, meaning they're not considered gold and silver. They're just a way of exchanging value. So in the issue of money, is the issue of an-naqdiyya, that the money is gold and silver, or a thamaniyya, that it's an instrument that can retain value. In our madhab, we say, لا riba fil fulus ولو راجع رواج النقدين. There is no riba in fulus, non-gold and silver, if the gold and silver is being used as the paper money. So in and of it themselves, independent of the gold and silver, paper money, gold, copper, bronze, etc., it does not carry in it the riba, because Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu argued that the ratio legis of the prohibition of riba in gold and silver is ta'abbudi. There is no rational explanation to it. We do it out of worship. And therefore, when it is ta'abbudi, in the usul way of thinking of Imam Shafi'i, therefore the rulings of it is restricted to gold and silver. In other words, the illah of the hurmaniyya of riba, according to Imam Shafi'i, is not a thamaniyya, it's a naqdiyya. It's not that it's money, is that it's strictly gold and silver. So if we have money in something else, that money in and of itself does not carry riba, which is one of the opinions that will allow us in the modern period, as we will see in the next clip, to allow some sort of financial transaction. That doesn't mean that you can't create a haram transaction with paper money. You can, of course. I mean, mashallah, we are excellent at creating haram scenarios. Astaghfirullah, Allah Ta'ala protect us. But the idea is that this is another opinion. The first opinion, the Malikis and some of the Hanafis and some of the Hanbalis say paper money or non-gold and silver money is like gold and silver in all of the ahkam, meaning that there will be zakat on it and then there'll be riba in it. The Shafi'is, some of the Hanafis and some of the Hanbalis say no, it's different because the riba is only in the gold and silver. So then the issue comes to paper money that we have today. Of course, there's going to be a difference of opinion. A whole bunch, I'm not going to say the majority, but a whole bunch of modern muftis and fiqh positions will say that paper money today, well, everyone says that there's zakah, because the discussion of zakah is different than the discussion of riba. The reason we pay zakah on the gold and silver, the illah behind it is not that it's gold and silver, it's a maliyah, it's a thamaniyah, it's that it's money. So anything that we have of money, that we use for money, we're going to pay zakah on it. Whether it is considered money, or some of the opinions say it's considered urud al-tijara, it's considered trade goods, or some people will say it's a note of debt. Whatever the case may be, when you have money, you can't wiggle out. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the sheikh of our sheikh, either it's Abdullah ibn Siddiq al-Ghumari, radiallahu anhu, I think it was Sayyid Abdullah, who has a risala, a very important risala. You can find his collected work, it's 19 volumes, arguing this in great detail, that there is zakah in paper money. That's different than the discussion of riba, because of the reasons that I just mentioned. A whole bunch of these modern muftis, quote unquote modern meaning they can go back maybe to the 40s and the 50s, will say that, look, paper money or not paper money, there's riba in that transaction. Because why? Because we consider the fulus to be part of the gold and silver, it's just an extension of gold and silver. The dissenting opinion, which is the opinion that I follow, the opinion that Dar al-Ifta in Egypt takes, which is becoming more popular, is this argument and articulation. Well, actually, that's not what Imam al-Shafi'i, it's mansus, it's literally stated in the text of the madhab, la riba fil fulus wa la uraja rawaj al-naqdain. And this is something that you should memorize, that there is no riba in non-gold. So translate fulus as non-gold and silver monies, or currency or monies that is not backed by gold and silver, if it is used in exchange of gold and silver, meaning it's used as tawasat tabadul, it's what we use to buy and exchange things. So when you find people that talk about the modern position of paper money as a riba or not riba, now you know a little bit about the rhyme and reason of where that's coming from. I'm running out of time in this clip, so let me pick up the discussion in the next one, inshallah. When I say this is my opinion or something like that, I'm not trying to impose my opinion on you, by the way, but when you teach a subject like this, I feel that one has to be academically honest. You have to know where I'm coming from. So I certainly see the other opinion, and there are many people, like Mufti Taqi Uthmani and people that are, Hafidhullah, that are a gazillion times more knowledgeable than me and better than me. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm at that level. I want you to know where I'm coming from. So sometimes some things slip from me or something like that, but my job is to present you with a balanced approach. I do critique the other position. I've mentioned that before, because the takyif I feel is incorrect, because if the United States and Nixon, when it severed, Richard Nixon severed the gold standard in America and floated the US dollar, and then there was a couple of countries that sort of subsequently did that. By the end of the 19th, certainly once we entered into the 1980s, there is no more gold and silver backed currency. The currency that we have right now is what we call fiat currency. It has no intrinsic value, and governments can just keep printing the value. Now the problem with the takyif, that's one thing, that's indisputable fact. That's not like my opinion, that's a fact. There is no currency right now that's backed by the gold and silver. However, the issue with the takyif is, or my critique of the other opinion, is that now we have another issue, which is inflation. And inflation is actually something that the ulama in the past dealt with. So in the dealing of gold and silver, there's no inflation, in the sense that if I paid you 100 dinars, or if I lent you 100 dinars, you have to give me 100 dinars back. That's just the way it is. There's No one's going to say that. And if the currency is backed by the gold and silver, even Imam Shafi'i would be like, you can only, $100 is $100. 100 francs is 100 francs, etc. The issue now becomes about inflation in fulus, in paper money. So there is also a difference of opinion in the classical fiqh. So some of the opinions will say, like the Hanafis, the Malikis, some of the Shafi'is, the Hanbalis, is that when you're dealing with gold and silver, you gotta, like I just said, you gotta deal equal amounts. Abu Yusuf from the Hanafis argued that if the difference, if there's a major devaluation for whatever, then it becomes a debt, the difference becomes a debt that you would pay later. Some of the Malikis, and the Malikis say that, one opinion of the Malikis is you quantify if the difference or the devaluation or the inflation is a lot or a not. If it's a little, then you ignore it. If it's a lot, then you can compensate for it. So there is some wiggle room in that, from that point of view, in the classical fiqh, even though the levels of inflation and devaluation in gold and silver are going to be minimal, if it's only gold and silver. Now, when it comes to paper money, I mean, all we are is living in one never-ending bubble of inflation. So the opinions about what we said about riba are also going to apply here. The people that say there is no riba in the paper money, like the Shafi'is and some of the modern mufti, fatwa institutions like the Fatwa Office of Egypt, they'll say, okay, well then that inflation can be compensated from as long as it's a bank and it's licensed. So we can't do that as individuals because the Prophet ﷺ forbade us bay'ul kali' bil kali'. So you can't sell a debt or for debt. So on an individual level, I can't lend you $100 and then say next month you pay me $110. That's haram. But the bank can do that, and that enters into another whole issue: is the bank lending or is the bank financing? So the use of the word al-qard is one of those mistranslations, because when I buy a house or a car or an asset or property, I'm not taking a loan from the bank. The bank is financing that. So a tamwil becomes a new term that's interjected. When you use and some countries unfortunately have not made that change, they still call it a qard. A personal loan is universally haram because the personal loan is not backed by an asset, and it can take the person into debt that they cannot pay back. And al-ighraqu fi ad-dayn, that's haram. Not that it's riba, but it's another type of haram. So there are other forms of haram transactions, obviously, other than riba. But if I'm buying a thing, an asset, a sil'a, then the opinion that says there's no riba allows that to happen. Okay, let me turn now. I mean, I don't want to just keep going in a circle and repeating that, but let me turn now maybe to something a little bit more contemporary and modern, which is the issue of digital currency, cryptocurrency. As a default idea, the idea of blockchain as a verification tool and cryptocurrency, digital currency, there's nothing wrong with that because the Sharia allows other forms of monies, fulus, that retain that are used as exchange of value for the purchasing of goods and things like that. The issue with cryptocurrency specifically, so first of all, the bank is really, our money really is digital money. If you think about it, it's really not paper money. When I say, paper money, that's like maybe 40, 50 years ago, and when most people just had cash, bags of cash and things like that. This is a little bit different, since the way proliferation of modern banking system, and I think I said in yesterday's class with insurance, I mean, it's impossible to be a modern person today and not have anything to do with a bank or some kind of financial institution. It's almost impossible. So when you think about it, our money really is all digital anyway. So the concept of cryptocurrency is not something that's new. We've had it. But when I say the word cryptocurrency today, people think, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, whatever those things are called, things like that. That's a type of electronic currency. The cryptocurrency is a type. So the concept, the bigger concept of digital currency, we're all only dealing with digital currency essentially. Those specific currencies, however, are a little bit different because many of them are not regulated. And the unregulation of a currency or monies or a vehicle of exchange leads the Sharia to conclude that there is too much gharar, there's too much speculation in that. There's something that's unknown. I mean, at the time of this recording, if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to Bitcoin specifically, we don't know who the person who started Bitcoin is, or and has no way of regulation itself. The Sharia has a big problem with that because that's just ripe for abuse. There has to be some kind of regulatory body, standard body. The reason the Muslim world accepted the concept of the bank is that the bank is a theoretical person, a shakhsiyya al-i'tibariyya. We have examples of that in our fiqh tradition, and some of the rulings of a person applies to the theoretical person, but it's not a real person. So some of the things don't apply. The bank is something that is licensed by the state, governed by the state, regulated by the state, needed by the state to facilitate the finance of big projects and people's lives and salaries and income and pensions and all of that kind of thing. We need that, just like we need roads and airplanes and ports and food regulation, ways and means, all the things that a modern state needs. So the bank is the same type of thing. So if a country were to develop a type of mining operation and it was regulated with rules and there was laws and the central bank or a governor of the central bank was able to regulate that, there's no problem with that whatsoever. So when you find some of the fatwas, I think Egypt's Dar I'm familiar, several years ago came up with a fatwa saying that Bitcoin was haram. And I think that, and I know that my colleagues that were there, they were telling me, I mean, it was like a very intense 2-3 day where like everyone dropped everything and they were all like, all the muftis were studying this issue and they were conversing and they came up with a 8-9 page fatwa. It was misunderstood saying, oh, these people are backward. It's not about the concept of cryptocurrency because we're already dealing with digital currency. The issue is the unregulated nature of it. And that's just a simple rule. Whether it's a new mufti or an old mufti, whether it's gold and silver or it's paper money, it doesn't matter. If there is something that's unknown in a transaction, not seen, completely unknown, one-sided, we call that gharar. It's just unknown and speculative, and therefore that's haram for us because we are preventing harm from befalling people. So that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to the discussion of cryptocurrency. Now, if somebody were to have a digital currency, as I said earlier when it came to paper money, there's going to be zakah on that because it's being used as money. So the issue of zakah, you have to understand in your mind, is different than the issue of fiqh, different from the issue of riba because of the usuli principle behind it. Most of the fuqaha are going to say that the illah of riba is ta'abbudi. I think actually all of the four madhab say that, meaning that there's no rational reason, so therefore it's always going to be limited to gold and silver. Even though some of the modern muftis will do ilhaq of the paper money or the fiat currency to that. But in and of itself, it's a ta'abudi. But the illah behind the zakah is not ta'abudi, it's al-maliyah, or it's al-maliyah, not al-naqdiyah. It's the fact that it has value and we use it to buy and purchase things, not that it's only gold and silver. So these are the main things I wanted to talk to you guys about. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, in today's class we talked about, as I said, what I think is probably one of the most controversial topics that we'll talk about, which is money and riba and zakah in modern money. And the reason is that the classical fiqh, always talks, so when you read the books of classical fiqh, every transaction is assumed that it's the dinar and the dirham, the gold coin and the silver coin. And as we said, throughout human history, we moved from bartering to gold and silver to being used, and instruments, non-gold and silver financial instruments that the fiqh calls fulus, that is related to, backed by, represents gold and silver. However, from the mid-1970s onward, we have a severing of the gold standard. I think Lebanon in the 1981 or 19, it was the last country to do this. There is no more link between the gold standard and paper money. And paper money today is simply called fiat currency. It has no intrinsic value. So this brings up a whole host of questions. Do we have riba in that, and do we pay zakat? The zakat question is easy because we said that the reason behind the illah behind the zakat is that it's money. So whether it's gold and silver or not gold and silver, we still pay zakat. But the fuqaha disputed the issue of paper money, fiat currency, and riba because of the illah. Is the illah only in gold and silver, or is that it's money? The ulama, like Imam Shafi'i, who said that the illah behind the prohibition of riba being ta'abbudi, meaning it's limited to gold and silver, say that there is no riba in other forms of money, non-gold and silver. And some of the other fuqaha argued against that, saying no, it is connected. And that's why today we have this, it's really a raging debate, unfortunately, it hasn't really been settled, that Many of the fiqh councils and modern muftis will say paper money is like gold and silver. The debt has to be the same, has to be same amounts, interest is haram, so on and so forth. But the people that follow the ijtihad of Imam Shafi'i and some of the fiqh bodies like Egypt's Dar al-Iftat argue that it's permissible because it's not riba. Then we talked a little bit at the end about cryptocurrency, and I said, well, digital currency is a better way to understand it, and all of our money is digital anyway. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue with certain types of current modern cryptocurrencies is the fact that they're not regulated. When something is not regulated or governed by the state, then it is considered gharar. It's considered a type of risk that the Sharia is not comfortable in taking, and therefore people will say that it's haram for that reason, not because that it's a digital currency. However, because it's money, as we said with zakah, you would still pay zakah on those things. Those are the main points we talked about. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.